Hello, everybody. This is Howard Kline. I'm your host for CREtV Live. I've been an attorney for almost 40 years. Actually, I don't want to tell you, it's more than 40 years. And today, we're going to be talking about what's really going on the commercial real estate market. And we have a special for a first time. We're doing our real estate trivia game, our commercial real estate trivia game, where that's going to be among my guests, Todd Kuhlmann, my co-host, Peter Morris, and Eric Paulson, also another guest. And the winner I'm going to give a $25 donation to the charity of their choice. So if you haven't thought of it, think of your charity because I'll mention it. So why don't we start out? This is live. I want everybody who's watching live to please pay attention to the chat. Make comments, tell us where you're from, ask questions, all in the comments section. This is on YouTube. If you have questions, ask the question with a Q, starting with a Q, colon. I want everybody to know that since I'm the only lawyer on this, I have to advise you, we're not giving out legal advice, and this might be considered attorney advertising because I want your legal business. Okay? So, we can now move on. I wanted to make it short. And let me now introduce my co-host, who is Peter Morris. Peter, say hello.
Hello, Howard and everybody else. I'm Peter Morris. I'm the CEO and founder of the Greenstead Consulting Group. We are an international commercial real estate advisory firm working with developers, investors, owners, and occupiers of commercial real estate all around the world, as well as being a commercial real estate training firm.
Great. And Peter's been around almost as long as me. I think he dyes his hair. Since we're going to be talking about hair, I'm going to mention something about Eric, so we'll move on. Okay, so let me start out with my big faux pas of the day. Todd Kuhlmann was one of my first guests back in early 2011 on CRE Radio. That's when we were early on. Eric, now I'm getting everybody mixed up. Todd is the founder of the Analyst Pro, which is a tremendous tool. It has morphed really, really well. He's also a teacher for CCIM, and here it says he's been in the business over 29 years. He's young enough that he doesn't have to worry about dyeing his hair. Now, my faux pas is that I created the graphic as a template from Eric, and I obviously didn't change the CEO of Topside Real Estate. Eric probably was not aware that he now has another co-chair with him. And here's Eric Paulson. Eric I've known since about 2012. I think I interviewed Eric at Recon. He's been in the commercial real estate business since 1988. I will provide more of this information. He's done a lot of deals. He's been a managing principal at Cushman and Wakefield in Orange County, California, and was the senior vice president of 10X Commercial, which at the time was auction.com, if I recall correctly. All right, now let's move on. So now, before we go on, here we're going to do our trivia game. I'm going to give each person, here are the rules on the trivia game, and let me go back so you can see me talking. So the rules on the trivia game is this. I'm going to ask one person first what the question. They're going to have 10 seconds or approximately 10 seconds to give an answer. If they fail to give an answer or they get it wrong, then our next guest will have the opportunity to have 5 seconds. It'll be 10 points per correct answer. There'll be a total of 5 questions, the last one of which will be a $25 point bonus. And as I said, whoever wins, and Peter, why don't you keep score? Because I'm going to be busy asking the question. So
I've got my pen handy.
Okay, so the first question is going to go to Todd. And here we go. Todd, what is the oldest real estate? Oh, no. Oh, that's not right. Oh, I did that wrong. That was the last one. Okay. There's question number 1. Got it wrong. All right. First question. What are the most antimicrobial doorknobs made out of?
Is this a real estate? Oh my gosh, Howard.
Of course it's real estate. I mean, their doors are part of their real estate.
I actually just read that.
I'll go with bronze.
Close, but no cigar. All right, Eric, you got a guess?
Wow, I'm not sure I want to get that one, but I know copper can be antimicrobial, but there's not a lot of doorknobs made of that. So I may just say brass because you said close with bronze.
Give that man 10 points! Did you cheat? You got it right. Brass doorknobs.
Well, I love it when you ask him first. I get to go do Siri. Hey, Siri, hey, quickly.
Yeah. Brass. I'll tell you a story about doing remote arbitrations, virtual arbitrations, and how you have to make sure that the camera's wide enough to see that there aren't people giving answers in the background. Brass doorknobs disinfect themselves. Several other metals disinfect themselves also, including copper, aluminum, iron, lead, silver, and silver all kill bacteria. However, brass is the most antimicrobial of them all, according to several sources. Who knows? In today's day and age, that seems to be a reasonable question to ask. If anybody is watching this on YouTube, I want to remind you, please subscribe to my channel and ring the bell, and I will show that to you. Ring the bell, which means that you will get an update anytime I add a video to YouTube. Question number 2. Okay. Question number 2 goes to Eric. Which famous bank robber destroyed mortgage documents when they robbed banks?
Wow. I know they weren't over at my house for Thanksgiving. Bonnie and Clyde.
See? No. The answer's no! And you've got it wrong. Todd, give it a try.
I was going to say the same thing, so I'm going to have to pass.
Oh, come on. Just make a guess.
I have no idea.
Okay.
DB Cooper.
Yeah. Gotta give the horn to you on that one. The answer is Charles Pretty Boy Floyd. He was a Great Depression-era gangster who was viewed positively by the general public. When he robbed banks, he would destroy mortgage documents, which freed many citizens of their debts. That was before Xerox and copiers and everything else. So if you destroyed the mortgage documents, the bank was just SOL. So nobody got any points on that.
So I do want to interrupt because I'm embarrassed. I was just at CRE, Colorado about 2 months ago, and that's where Floyd was actually shot and killed, is up there in Creed. So I'm embarrassed I did not know that one.
He's going to haunt you now. He's going to haunt you. Okay, Todd, this is your question. In what year were there more foreclosures than marriages? Whoops, hold it.
I'm going to go with 2009. I go 2009, 2010, but let's say 2009.
Okay, hold on a second. While I must have just done something that caused an issue. I know what I did, but
you
I'm
went to go.
Yeah, Eric's Googling this right now.
Yeah, I don't know.
Siri says.
I don't know how to get this back. So
That's okay. Just go with the flow, Howard.
yeah, I'm just going to go with the flow. So we won't be able to see the question. The answer is correct.
Nice.
2009.
Nice.
I had
I
to
get
that
looking
sound
at Las
no matter
Vegas.
Yeah, I had to research this up. According to, of all things, the CDC has this record. There were 2,132,853 marriages in 2009, and I understand they've just ordered a recount. According to
That's a popular word right now, isn't it?
yeah,
That's when Groucho Marx bird flies down and lets you know you got the right word of the day.
I really try not to be political, but I blurted that one out. Didn't even think of that one before. According to Reuters, there were over 2,800,000 foreclosures that year. And according to the CDC again, there were over 782,000 divorces. And I started researching this and realized that, you know what? I saw a lot of information about how during recessions divorces go up. To me, that's pretty obvious. Financial problems. Okay, Eric, here you go. Here's your question. I don't know why I can't get that back. So you're up 20 to zilch, Todd.
Actually,
No,
Todd's at
even.
10 and Eric's at 10.
We're tied. We're tied.
Yeah.
Well,
I got
who's
one tie.
Tied up.
Oh, okay. All right, so they're tied up.
I'm keeping score, Howard.
All right, I got to move on. What building, this is for Eric, right? What
Yes.
building was known as the Empty Space Building? This is an easy one. And Eric's going, eh.
The empty space building.
Mm-hmm.
Anything in downtown Calgary.
Yeah, I was about to say anything between my ears, but it's just as good. I actually do not know the answer to that. So empty space building.
Sorry. Too late. You're done. All right, Todd. Do you know what the Empty Space Building is?
Oh, I just have to guess. Let's just go with the Willis Tower.
Absolutely wrong. Is that your final answer?
Yeah.
Nope. It's the Empire State Building. The Empire State Building was completed in 1931 at the height of the Great Depression. Because of the state of the economy at the time, approximately 77% of its office space remained unleased for years, which made New Yorkers start calling it the Empty Space Building. We have no winners on that one. Oh, these days, space in the Empire State Building is not only scarce, but also some of the most expensive real estate in Manhattan. That must have been written before March of 2020, because right now, I would imagine it's the Empty Space Building right now.
The Empty Space City.
Yeah, and we'll be talking about that. And here's the bonus trivia question. It's worth 25 points. The first person to raise their hand gets the opportunity to answer the question first. What is the oldest real estate brokerage in the United States? Go ahead.
I'm going to go with CB Richard Ellis.
Wrong. Todd?
I do not know, Howard. And I did not look that one up because you put that slide up earlier. So I was tempted. I was so tempted.
There were probably a couple of answers. Chicago's Baird and Warner claims to be the oldest real estate brokerage in the United States. With that being said, though through a search on Google, it indicates that there are a number of brokerages that also claim this distinction. Now, I'm writing this, including McCune Earhart Real Estate, according to Realtor Magazine, and Helmsley Spear, according to Connect Online Magazine. I don't know. I can't imagine that Helmsley Spear was the oldest one, because Helmsley was in my lifetime. So maybe Spear was prior to that, but that's how it goes. So, Peter, what's the total Score.
We
Well,
tied,
you're
I
going to
think.
have to split that donation because Todd has 10 points and Eric has 10 points.
Oh,
So
okay.
there's
So
no winner
I will.
today.
I'm gonna go. Oh, Todd, it's yours. I'll give it to your charity, Todd. It's
All right,
yours.
Todd,
I
who
think
you would
we
mention?
I think we put Howard on the spot here and say
I'd
25 to
pick-
each of us, right?
And that's what I was going to say. And you took my thunder from me. All right, Todd, who do you want the $25 to go to in your name?
CCIM Education Foundation, please.
All right, would you send me the contact information for that? And have you thought of anything, Eric?
Yes, I'm going to suggest Homemade OC, which is Homemade Orange County, which is a organization trying to solve homeless in Orange County.
Great.
Awesome.
Please send me the information, and I will send $25 to each of your charities in your name. Okay, we're now going to move on. The next thing that we're going to be talking about, we're back to a normal screen. Todd is going to take approximately 5 minutes and talk about pre and post COVID financing issue. Let's try that again. We do that as an outtake? Todd, take it away.
Thanks, Howard. And yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about pre and post COVID cash flow analysis, cash flow modeling for properties. So there's been a lot of changes over the last several months thanks to COVID. But I want us to go back and look really at the fundamentals of commercial real estate. And the fundamentals, obviously, we always talked about in real estate: location, location, location. And that's probably more true today than has been since I've gotten into the business. But it really comes down to supply and demand, which has always been this economic fundamental for commercial real estate in every market and every situation that I've worked with and worked in finance. Supply and demand. What we're seeing right now, and I'm hearing stories after stories about markets that are coming, 25% greater vacancy than they had pre-COVID. We're looking at rent abatements. I think some of the last rent abatements I heard for some properties in New York was up to even 17 months of rent abatements they were looking at for some properties in New York. But what we have to look at a little bit closer is that supply and demand for each of those locations, where we've been with supply and demand over the last several months. Because in my market, and I'm in Austin, Texas, but I'm actually in a suburb of Austin, Texas. So some of my friends that have multifamily properties in downtown area, they've seen a drop in the value of their properties in the CBDs. But us in the suburbs, we're really not feeling any difference. Now, we're not really feeling a difference in the supply and demand from pre-COVID, which leads me to say, well, how does that change my post-COVID cash flow numbers? It hasn't changed them in my market that much. So we're a strong tech market with a lot of people that have actually decided to live and work in the suburbs. And we're going to be talking a little bit about retail. I know that's a big topic, but they're building big retail shopping centers just down from me. Not shopping centers, but retail anchored centers, grocery anchored centers and strip centers are being developed. While the malls are really hurting, the shopping center malls are hurting, some of our outlining retail centers in the suburban areas are actually doing very well and actually growing. And it goes back to the original fundamental of commercial real estate: follow the rooftops. And so when we're looking at retail property and retail cash flow modeling, and we'll talk about this more, maybe we need to look at the repurposement of the retail, but that started pre-COVID as well. So we're seeing a lot of different things based on market, location, supply and demand. The last thing I'll end with here, Howard, before we hand it over, one of the things I recommend everyone to watch the supply and demand for their market. Watch this thing called absorption and absorption rates. And you can get monthly and quarterly absorption rates from different sources out there. CoStar, Reese is a great one that we look at absorption rates. Look at these absorption rates that are coming through in your markets, because that is the leading indicator of supply and demand. And as you have negative absorption, which means higher vacancies, more product on the line, you'll see rents go down. As rents go down, NOI goes down. As NOI goes down, property values also go down. But the reverse is true as well. So as you see positive absorption in markets and in some of the secondary markets out there, and even the tertiary markets and suburban markets, we're seeing even office thrive in our particular sub-market that we're in. So there's not one right answer to this, but I do believe the right answer is got to look at the location, supply and demand, and absorption. And with that, Howard, I'll hand it back over to you.
Super. If anybody has any questions, please put it into the comments section. Again, I'm not seeing any comments. I'm pretty sure that we are live, but for some reason, I don't even know if anybody's on and watching this. So again, this is a beta, but it gets shown, repeat anyhow. So
Anyway. So Howard, I got a comment and a question for Todd, because Todd focused on NOI, and I want him to just touch base on cap rates, because as those NOIs go down, risk goes up, so cap rates will also adjust. So you got a double hit on that. Just want to make one quick comment though. Todd, you were talking about where you are in Austin, Texas. I got to tell you that I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and we're seeing the same thing. As people have realized, and you must understand that Vancouver is landlocked. I mean, you can't go west, that's water. You can't go north, that's mountains. You can't go south, that's the United States, and the border's closed. And you can't go east because there's other municipalities. So it's very much a dense market. And so getting around anywhere was difficult. So people were moving downtown and living downtown, and it wasn't unheard of to spend $1.5 million for a 500 square foot condo in downtown Vancouver. But what we're finding is people have now moved to online work, and we're seeing the rental market in downtown Vancouver collapse just over the past few months. Average rents in multifamily have gone down 8%. Now in the suburbs, a couple of interesting things have happened. Number one, single family home sales are through the roof because people are saying, I can't live in 400 square feet anymore. I don't have to. Let me go buy a 4,000 square foot home in the suburbs. And we're seeing the same thing with rents as well. We're also seeing, to your point, Todd, is that office rents in the suburbs are staying fairly buoyant as well, whereas downtown, not so much anymore. And I just point that out only because it's not just isolated to one market. It's in a lot of different markets.
Absolutely. Eric, you want to have a
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'm in Orange County, California, and we're seeing the same thing. And part of the flight, if you will, is downtowns are usually experientials. You go into there, you've got everything happening around you. Downtown LA, you've got LA Live, you've got the stadiums, you've got all these restaurants happening, and you can't go into any of them. So by working remote, you have the ability to have less rent, you have the ability to have more space, and you're getting the same type of experience out in the suburbs, if you will. So we've seen the same thing down here. You're seeing second home markets even picking up, because if I'm going to be working online, I'd rather be in Lake Tahoe, or I'd rather be out in the desert. So you are seeing a flight out. Now, the question that really comes into play is that permanent? And there's a lot of folks that have argued back and forth that no, it's not permanent. And once this is all over, that is going to become, again, the hip happening spots. Employers will require people to be in the office. So you'll see that movement back in. And one thing before I turn it back over, I'm a big fan of what Todd said in regards to supply demand. I'm a huge fan of supply demand. I completely agree. That's how you're looking at things. And when you say location, 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 remember that's talking about Main and Main. And there's only 4 corners on Main and Main. So there's a very limited supply of it. And there's a big demand to be on Main and Main. So it all boils down to supply and demand. So as we are looking towards the future, are the jobs going to be in the suburbs, or are the jobs going to be in downtowns and the CBDs? And I think that's where you're going to try and find where you're going to get the crystal ball out, is when will it go back? Until then, you've got more safety in the suburbs, if you will, because it's less dense. You can walk up to your building. You don't necessarily have to go into an elevator. You can have your own entrance. So we'll see.
Or we'll see multiple downtowns. That's a possibility as well.
Yeah, there's the way that I wanted to break down, and we've just kind of morphed, segued, should I say, into our main conversation, is what's really going on. And as the four of us briefly discussed, I think of this in terms of an outline is like, okay, there are various variables. Is that redundant? But there are a number of variables. How about that? And those variables would include time, place, and money, whatever. And in terms of location, that's a great place for us to start because it does vary from market to market. Most of us at least think of, well, because I lived in New York City, I grew up in New York, I'm thinking, and I know I probably should have had someone else on that I know who's doing work in downtown or Manhattan, and it's like a wasteland. And I've seen that term used in articles. Who wants to, go up an elevator up to 50 stories? I mean, those buildings, and it's going to be a while before before people are going to want to take the subway, before the subway has got to be a petri dish. We were talking about cruising. So any of the major CBDs, I would think Los Angeles would be a little bit different. And because Los Angeles has a kind of smallish, high-rise downtown area, and it's very spread out. It's more of a suburban type situation. I don't think LA is going to be as affected as, say, a New York City, a San Francisco.
But
you have more residences there. That's probably why. I don't think LA's is.
Yeah, I lived in LA, and I agree. I mean, the around Staples Center and that's a relatively confined area. But when I said multiple downtown cores, I was thinking of the Wilshire Boulevard, the Wilshire district, and going down that way. I mean, there are multiple downtowns in Los Angeles. There isn't one downtown in Los Angeles, interestingly enough. And you get the same thing. You go just outside of proper Los Angeles, you get Glendale, and it's got its own downtown. And so, I think you'll see that in other cities as well. Houston, Dallas, Philadelphia, you'll see that more and more. I haven't had a chance to hear Todd's comment on cap rate, so I'm interested in that one.
Todd?
Well, obviously the cap, everything to me is based on that NOI. And then when you're looking at placing the cap rate, obviously the cap rate's used to determine the value. When you're looking at placing the cap rate on the property, it comes down to risk. And so it's how much are you going to pay for that NOI? How much are you going to pay for each dollar of that NOI? And risk really comes down to, in my opinion, and there's all kinds of articles, and you can make this very, very complicated, but risk to me is if I'm paying, let's say, $10 today to receive $1 in NOI in a year, the risk is, what if I don't receive that dollar in a year? So basically all I'm doing is saying, when I'm buying real estate, I'm buying future cash flow. So when I'm buying future cash flow, what's my risk of receiving that cash flow or not receiving that cash flow? The higher the risk, obviously you would pay less for those future cash flows, i.e. a lower cap rate for those future cash flows. But I'm going to probably be the most optimistic COVID person you've had in commercial real estate. And it's not because I'm living just in this bubble. It's because I've, and Howard and I were talking about this earlier, been through several different recessions. This is not like any other recession that I have lived through. And the Great Recession, which was, I was a commercial real estate lender back in 2007, 2008, 2009. That was a horrible time to be a lender in commercial real estate. This is nothing like that time. I'm sitting there going, I'm ready to start investing again because there should be some opportunity. And I'm scratching my head going, I haven't seen that ideal opportunity yet. And I think, and I want to bring Eric in on this because we were talking about industrial properties before today's session. This is very interesting to me because for years, industrial has been the sweetheart property investment type. Well, you have a flight to security right now, i.e. safety. So all this money's flowing now to secure less risk investments. And so I'll throw it to Eric. What are you seeing on industrial as far as cap rates and cash and what returns are getting and spreads are getting on industrial properties?
Absolutely. It's back to our supply demand. There's not a lot of industrial available for sale, and there's plenty of money chasing it. So you're seeing cap rates go down with the flood of money chasing it. So what people are doing is you basically call them chasing yield. And so they're out trying to find that return that they were used to in the past, trying to not having to compete for every single asset. So they're moving out of California and looking into Arizona, and they're looking into Utah, and they're looking into Nevada. But the problem is that same money is also going out there. So I think California real estate is a better opportunity at the same price versus in Arizona, Nevada, and a Utah. But if I can get a better yield out there, I could go do that. But since there's so much money, you're seeing those spreads coming down and down. And that risk level, people are taking a little bit more risk to be more passive in their secure investments.
And Todd, you made a great point, and it's interesting to me that this is not like other recessions. In other recessions, for an example, in the Great Depression recession of 2008, 2009.
It was a depression for some of us.
It was a depression,
Yes.
but it was widespread, and it affected all kinds of industries. And here we are, we're in the midst of the pandemic. We're seeing, from a pure investment standpoint, CRE's getting beat up a little bit, but the stock market still zooms. And so if you're looking for yield,
we're all real estate people not understanding the stock market.
I know, but if you're looking at yield, you're going to be sitting there going, okay, now what are we going to do? Well, if it's going to become too big a spread, and will people jettison out of commercial real estate for these other investments that don't seem to be buffeted by the pandemic like everything else? And I have to admit, I'm shocked that the stock market has done as well as it has.
Well, you got to put your money somewhere. So I'm okay with the stock market. It's an alternative investment to real estate, but you've heard it here on this show, and I'm calling it. We're not going to call it the Great Recession. We're just going to call it the Great Hibernation, because I don't think we are all in trouble. I think we're asleep. We're hibernating. We're not dead. And when they lift this arbitrary, well, we are younger than you, Howard, but it's one of those ones where I think we're not dead, and we will see as soon as they kind of release the COVID quarantine, you will see a sharp bounce back. So as an investor today, I'm just looking at that horizon. And do I think it's going to be all the way through 2021 into 2022? I probably don't. So you want to invest somewhere between the 10% of the bottom and 10% of the rise, that U at the bottom. And I think there's enough money to make sure that U is not that deep. So I think you could be buying now in anticipation that 2021 you'll start seeing the uptick or maybe a small drop, but not enough to put your investment at risk.
Yeah, I agree.
That is, it depends on product types.
Yeah,
and I'll just back up a little bit of what Peter was talking about in the stock market. I mean, if you take it down to the consumer level, I mean, look at and consumer purchases and consumer purchasing, consumer confidence is what drives a lot of the stock market and valuations. So if we're looking at that, I mean, car lots around where I live are sold out of cars. I mean, people are buying cars right and left, or buying boats as fast as they can buy boats, RVs as fast as they can buy RVs. Houses, I just heard a report in our area, home sales are up exponentially. And so none of this was happening during the Great Recession, as you call it. So backing that up, so then if I look at, well, when did we have an area where we stopped flying, we stopped doing business? And you have to go kind of back to 9/11. And after 9/11 and what happened there, and I heard a great webinar just the other day. New York leasing broker was sitting there going, he lived through 9/11 in New York, and it became a ghost town after 9/11 in New York. And the last thing anybody wanted to do was go up an elevator 50 flights and have a top story office up in New York. But on the same token, you flip that back, and we rebounded. New York rebounded. Office becomes a lot about attracting talent. And when I say talent, human capital, if you will. And so Austin has attracted a lot of human capital here. from California, by the way, Eric, a lot of human capital, but from the tech industry, right? So we've attracted a lot of techies to come work here, but they love being social. And I think one of the number one issues on not being able to go into the office is not being able to socialize in that office and collaborate in that office environment. I agree with Eric. I think what you're going to see is you're going to see this U. When do you come in on the U? If you wait too late, I think you're going to see this quick rebound, especially with a vaccine coming. I think we're looking at mid 2011 before people are sitting there saying, hey, I want to get back.
Yeah, we'll probably get the vaccine before you if it's coming out of Pfizer. It has to be stored at minus 70 degrees. That's Canada weather in winter, so we'll get it first.
Yeah, they'll just ship it out in the open. So why don't we talk about, the various sectors? And I'd like to get to that. And Peter, why don't I start with you with retail, because you may be leaving shortly.
Yeah, unfortunately, I might have to skip out here a little bit early. So retail, I guess it's no surprise to anybody, has been the worst hit on this. And I think that, we haven't seen the worst of it yet. 25% of all retail sales happened in the last 8 weeks of the year. And there's not going to be any Black Friday, mobs going in or anything of that nature. We've seen a number of bankruptcies. Howard and I have done webinars on this beforehand. I think that we're going to see wholesale changes to repurposing large enclosed shopping centers. They've fallen out of favor. We're going to see more of and it's following our previous conversation of where people are going and going out into the suburbs. We're going to see a lot more convenience shopping, lifestyle shopping, experiential shopping. We're already seeing that the tenants that are backfilling the failed retailers are ones you can't replicate online. One of my clients is waxing the city. As I tell landlords, you can't get waxing online. So don't even think about alternative revenue streams for these people. You need to help them out. So
what kind of waxing are we talking about?
Personal waxing.
Oh, I
Taking
thought
the
you
hair
were
off the
like
top of your head.
auto waxing. It's
No,
like
no,
auto
no.
waxing. Is this a Brazilian wax? I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
that kind of stuff. Yeah, that kind of stuff. So anyway, the thing is that we're seeing gyms replacing, we're seeing personal services replacing, and so we're going to see repurposing of retail real estate. And I know of a number of major developers across North America that are already positioning themselves to snap up failed or failing or distressed shopping centers, because their land, they're sitting on so much land. The land value alone is there for intensifying the land use. And guess what? Municipalities are saying, we'll help you with that, because they're saying, I can increase my tax base and I don't have to go and build out into the suburbs. We don't have an Austin type world in Vancouver. So they're really friendly about that. But it's not just Vancouver. We're seeing it all around the land.
Yeah, and I'm gonna add on to that, because you are seeing cities helping try and turn this, and that's unusual, because when you think about it, that's their sales revenue. They don't get sales revenue on houses. They really like their retail, but we're finding that cities are willing to give up that retail space and then turn it into an alternative use that's not retail. And I think the big part of that argument is, if you can prove that your shoppers are staying within your city and going to different centers within your city, we will let you take down that shopping center that's not working and is not functional today. So you're seeing them a little bit more willing to give up a retail zone site to either have it be an office building or something more creative to it too, which I've found fascinating, because that usually was sacrosanct. You were never able to convert retail into something else because that was part of their tax base. And now you're seeing a little bit more opening for that to happen.
Yeah, the biggest sector of the market, I think, is mixed use, and will continue to drive. We're not going to look at single-use properties anymore.
Yeah, that was also before COVID, though. Mixed use was very hot. And here in Vegas, it remains, again, I don't know where that light is coming from. Oh, I see where it is. We went through this yesterday. I thought I took care of that light. Yeah, if I go like this.
So I want to follow up with that question, Howard, because Peter, you bring up a good point, and all those points you bring out on retail, that Eric, you basically come in and confirm. how much of that was happening pre-COVID, and then how much did COVID maybe accelerate what was going to happen anyway?
Well, I think that it was happening before COVID, but I think what's going to happen is that the economics are going to improve when you start to see some of these major shopping centers go back to lenders or are distressed and NOIs go down. To your point of earlier, Todd, diminishing value. Where's the value? How do I extract value? Well, I extract value as a development, and I repurpose my real estate.
Right, but what's also difficult when you remember these huge enclosed malls is that a lot of times they have multiple owners. So it'd be nice if a Simon or Westfield or Macerich owned the whole thing, but typically Sears owns Sears, JCPenney's owns JCPenney's, Macy's owns. So you've got a big chunk of that you don't control. So you're having to work with other parties to make sure it's being utilized appropriately, because they've got cross rights that says not happening.
Interesting you use those names. Are they going to be here at the end of 2021?
Doesn't matter. They can sell it to a third party. But you're right. I think those groups are at risk, but those are pure real estate plays, and you're finding that third-party developers are getting the rights to all of the Sears and are getting the rights to all of those. So they are going to go in and do something, but they can go to the owner of the rest of the shops and say, okay, how are we going to play this together? Because I control a big chunk of the space, and I'm going to turn it into an industrial building. No, you're not. It doesn't work that way.
With so many people moving back to the suburbs out of the CBDs, is that going to save some of the indoor malls in the suburbs?
I have a tough time thinking so. We're OverMauled. You hear studies all the time that says a good 25% of them are great. A good 30, 40% of them are average to above average, and the rest could go any day. That they're just not functional. We're OverMauled.
Let's talk
My
a little bit.
perspective is we started to see the end of the enclosed fashion mall some time ago, because the lifeblood of leasing in an enclosed fashion mall was the specialty retailer. And when we started to move to the larger boxes, the sub anchors, we started to see that those people didn't have to be in the malls anymore. They could operate on the street. And so we started to see the decline way back then. And with the loss of the department stores, which is a big traffic driver, that's just accelerating.
Very interesting. What about office? What's going on with office? We talked about it depends upon where you're at, but overall, Todd, what is going on with office? Do you see that there's going to be a permanent shift, or say by the beginning of 2022, people are just going to go back into the office and forget about this COVID thing?
Well, let me quantify this by saying I'm not the office expert, but I did research this, and I love going to Moodys reports and taking a look at some of these numbers. And at first glance, so Reese came out just recently at the end of last month with their first glance report of what happened in the third quarter. And what they showed in the office market was actually we were already dipping down in our absorption to a negative absorption in the second quarter of this year, which is kind of interesting, right? Because that was right at the beginning of the COVID. But then they had a small positive absorption in the third quarter, or a positive absorption in the second quarter, and then a negative absorption in the third quarter. So let me restate that. Negative absorption in the first quarter, positive absorption in the second quarter, big negative absorption in the third quarter. Well, with that big negative absorption, now you have vacancies going way up. But then I looked at the very next slide, and it was showing rents were actually going up a little bit. And so I think this is where you have that huge separation between that downtown CBD office, your downtown San Francisco, your downtown Boston, your downtown New York office properties, and then the suburban office properties. And that's where I think you're getting this big disconnect. But you're going to, and going to your second part of that question, Howard, is what do I predict on that? Again, I think that I'm going to go back to what I said before. I think that human capital, that talent that you need to hire to bring in, and whether you're doing technology or finance, exactly what you're doing, they need office. And we are a heavy office country. And our education and our backgrounds are really going more toward that heavy office use. And so I think you're going to have to still attract people that want to go in and have their cups of coffee and socialize and things like that. Now, I will say from some of the experts I've heard from, there's this new flex office, which I think is going to be very interesting. And Eric, you're shaking your head, so I think you might know more about that being in Orange County, because that seems to be kind of the new path that people are looking at going is flex office.
Yeah, I think it's the flexibility. So one of the main reasons I believe that we're going to go back to the office is technology doesn't work all the time, and sometimes you lose your connection and disappear for a while and have to come back. The other reason for me is if you are creating a culture, it's awfully tough to do it online. And then to retain and recruit clients, or excuse me, to retain and recruit employees, how do you train them? How do you get them going? What's one living room or one dining room is the same as the next. You want them in your office. And then my ultimate point to this is we're in and I usually use a foul language. We're in a half functioning market right now, a half booty market. We've got our no deadlines. We've got a lot of flexibility with timing. Hey, get it to me next week. I know you're busy. I'm busy. We can't go into the office. So we're not competing at full bore. But I think as soon as we have to go compete, we have deadlines, we will be back in the office. And that's where the flexibility comes in, is if I need my whole team in, I have to space them out. I have to maybe shift. I have to do half in, half out. And it's going to be a lot more complicated. But what we're seeing right now for tenants that have leases that are expiring here is they're not signing brand new 5-year leases. They're kicking the can down the road. They're signing at little 1-year extensions. To be an office tenant rep broker right now is brutal, because your tenants are saying, we're going to stay in place. We're just going to do it for a year. We'll get back to you next year. And they're trying to keep that flexibility.
And I think
go
the
ahead,
key
Peter,
word,
and then because I don't want to, I'm going to lose you soon. So.
Yeah, you're going to lose me really soon. But I think the key word for commercial real estate right now is hybrid. Whether you're talking retail, you're talking mixed use, you're talking office, because in the backdrop, and I agree with both Eric and Todd on the comments on office, but in the backdrop, you have the gig economy. You have whole departments of companies where they've realized where they were afraid to let them work from home and be remote workers are now saying, we don't actually need them in the office. There was a report that I just read, and we talked about it before the show, where they did a survey of 400 finance people within the commercial real estate world, and 31% said we're giving up some of our space right now, and 22% said that they were going to be giving up more space next year. So I think this whole concept of flex space, hybrid, hoteling, hot desking, all of these other things will play, as will the idea that you need to have your people around you to develop culture, to do training, to do all of those other things. So I think we're going to see a little bit of both and repurposing. Just before I go, I have a client in Canada. They're one of the largest office owners in Canada, and they did a study of their own employees. Howard knows this story because I've related it before, and they did some electronic monitoring on their employees, and within their office they found that the person that used their office the most was only in the office 32% of the time, and this was in 2019, before COVID. And so what they're saying is, look, maybe we need more meeting space rather than dedicated office space, and more team space. So I think we're going to see that hybrid repurposing of space in office as well. And with that, unfortunately, gentlemen, I got to run.
Oh, and I was going to rebut you, but you're going to miss everything I'm saying about it. I'll talk nicely behind your back.
I'll see you after the first of the year. I'd like to add something to all of this. For someone who has worked out of a home office for probably 75% of the last 20 years, I think it depends upon what your responsibility is and what you can do. Not everybody can work out of their house. Some people can. Your responsibilities are different. Last year, I really relished the fact of going to the real estate brokerage company and sitting in the office. I liked being there among other people. When I've been general counsel over the last 30 some odd years, I like to be in an office where the CEO is. because when I'm there, the CEO runs into my office and pulls me into his office. The convenience is certainly great. With that being said, now I look at this from an economic perspective. There will be people are learning that they can work remotely. A certain percentage will do that. I don't know what the percentage is, but you're going to see maybe a 10, 15, 20% permanent reduction. Can office buildings and office landlords afford that kind of reduction? So we're not talking about everybody working remotely as they are now, but we're talking about a long term. And I asked that question. I don't know what the number will be, but I'm pretty sure the number will be relatively substantial. 10% reduction in office occupancy is very substantial.
It's a possibility to answer that question. And in my humble opinion, it's like our supply demand being a mantra. So the other mantra is it depends. So it's depend on markets, can depend on building. But I think if you are saying 10% is not going to come into the office, I'm suggesting that the remaining 90% is going to spread out into that 100% as you create more space. I think it's tough to create a culture. You do want to be around. I joke about this one. You loved it when the CEO was able to run into your office. Well, vice versa. It's awfully nice to be able to kiss his booty when he's next door because you sure aren't doing that online. So how do you go take those extra steps?
I got to tell you, it was never nice kissing his booty or her booty. That wasn't one of my favorite things.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. It's tough to go those extra steps that get you noticed when you're not around. And I really think that synergy of working together, that drive, I think when all cylinders are firing, you want everybody there because that's how the team works toughest. But what I find duplicitous or hypocritical is you hear all these tech companies saying, we're going to work from home. We're going to work from home. And then Facebook just spends $400 million on an office campus. They bought REI's brand new campus. You've got so much expansion with the Googles and with the Apples and Netflixes that all of these tech companies are saying, we're going to work from home. I'll take that 1 million square feet over there. I'll take that 400,000 square feet over there. So it's really difficult for me to believe that while they're saying we're going to work from home, we're going to stay home. And I think the driver in all this, we've already said vaccine, there's two drivers. One will be as soon as a vaccine comes out and as soon as somebody in the legal profession says you can't be sued for having COVID caught by one of your employees. I think that's the get out of jail free card we're all waiting for so we can go back.
I get that question a lot. And if anybody wants to watch it, I did a webinar on business liability in a coronavirus world. And yes, that liability is still out there. I won't talk about what people are attempting to do in terms of changing it from negligence to gross negligence, etc., and all that goes into that. But yeah, that is an issue. It's a major issue. Do you force people? Was it you that I had this conversation with, Eric, about
I believe
liability?
It was. Yeah. Because part of it to me is I was talking with an attorney the other day who had a client with 6 employees. They all got it, and one of the spouses of an employee died from it. So where's that liability reside, and can you prove who created or who brought it in? And is that owner of that business, if they followed safety protocols or not, or there's just, I mean, I would be panicking right now.
Yeah, it's a question of proof and who you're proving it to and where those people are that you're proving it to. So it may be a different burden proving it in California versus in Alabama or New York or Minnesota. And it always comes down to an issue of proof. And as an attorney who does litigation, I do think it's like, okay, I know you're right, but how are we going to prove it?
Right. And I think part of that other is, hey, there's a vaccine out there. You can't blame me for not going and getting vaccinated and catching it. So I've talked with a tech company that has 800 employees and says, we're working from home. until there's a vaccine. I said, well, what's plan B if no vaccine comes out? He says, we're not going back.
Wow.
So I think people are relying on that.
Yeah, and it sure seems we're soon to be running out of time, but it sure seems that if you believe everything that you hear, that science has really progressed to produce a number of vaccines. A lot of these are like new methods of producing vaccines.
Right. But Howard, so flu vaccines have been around for 80 years, and still only 50 to 60% of the adult population get it. So is this serious enough where people will actually go out and get one? That kind of remains to be seen too. But it is for an owner of the business. I can point to it.
Personally, I'm high risk on a number of factors. I'm high risk. With that being said, my experience tells me that whenever you rush something, it tends to be problematic. When I rush something, I tend to make mistakes. So I can afford to socially distance. I can afford to do it. It's not that big a deal for me. So I'm going to be a little bit more on the safe side and kind of wait and see the efficacy of these vaccines. I can afford to do it. Not everybody's going to be able to afford to do it. I'm just uncomfortable about rushing things. Things get messed up when you rush it. That's all I know.
Yeah. It's a fair comment.
So, yeah.
Todd, so Eric, I actually have a question for you. Having that expertise in office, a lot of discussion has come out as essential employees. Who is essential employees? Obviously, the healthcare is a given. Are there any specific tenant types that you would see in the office industry as essential users? And would you see them returning before maybe some non-essential employees?
That's a great question, because I think there are some that you would look at that could be essential. So when you're talking about, when you're from the government, you'll turn around and say, yeah, we want those accountants filling out those tax bills, right? We want to get paid. You've got the back offices sending out bills. You've got, I would say, it's tough to call it clerical work, but there's a lot of that which really keeps the oil that keeps that engine running. So I could see companies saying, look, I always need my mailroom guy there. I always need my assistants there who keep the machine humming. So they're essential to my business, but they're also the lowest paid, if you will. So you could turn around and say, oh, look, Mr. CEO is hanging out at the beach while he's making the mail clerk work. You run into some of that. So I think there are essentials that keep the machine running that you could point to. But it's going to be very difficult to say it's person A versus person B, and force person A as essential to go back to the office when they're nervous about it.
That's great. That's a great point. I think, just from my perspective, one of the things you talked about too was coming out, obviously we talked about the vaccine, the liability, but I'm going to go back to just the socialization. And every survey and everything that I've seen, not that surveys are correct right now, but everything I've seen right now is that the number one thing that people are missing from the environment is the socialization. And so I think that socialization, collaboration, we are social beings, we're social animals. So I feel that, and all the economists have said, is this a V, is this a W? And I feel that vaccine probably will be a game changer for that V, right, if you will, or U.
And when you mention essential, this is probably going to raise some feathers, but I think teachers are essential. I think we've got a generation of children that need to be in school for that social reason and for the reasons we've talked about before. And a lot of teachers are the ones at most risk too. So who wins and who loses with this vaccine? And really what's been happening is government's been choosing winners and losers in this. And right now we all feel like we're kind of losers.
Yeah. I'm crossing my fingers on the vaccine. I really am.
Well, I'm just going to go in, Howard, full in and say I'm just real positive about the commercial real estate market. I'm not seeing any of the signs that I've seen in the last recessions that we've had. I'm if anything, 2021, I think is going to be a great year for commercial real estate. So I'm going to say that.
The great hibernation, man. We're coming out of our caves. It's that simple.
That's right.
I think we are on pause. As soon as they push play, I know UCLA said we lost 21 million jobs, and we've already gotten 11 million of them back in the states that opened up. California is still on hold, and we've only recovered 20. But as soon as they say go, my guess is those $10 million jobs roar back. I don't know that we'll get all 10 because of a lot of it's service industry, but I think once you see population and work growth, you're going to see recovery.
If the vaccines are effective, you are going to see a V-shaped recovery. But again, the general public is not going to be getting any of these vaccines until April. And then people have to get the vaccines. So I don't really anticipate a V-shape recovery. I'm not even sure that I'm going to see much of a recovery in 2021. I'm optimistic that 2022, particularly if the vaccines are good, 2022 is going to be one hell of a year. That's what I'm looking at. And I expect to see that come off. So as I told you, I'm looking to start investing after the first of the year. Because by then, my experience is that as retailers make it through the end of the year, they're trying to make it through the end of the year. We're going to see a bunch more bankruptcies after the first of the year, and then that's a good time to buy. I could be wrong.
And that is less than 2 months away.
Yes,
so we're almost already there.
Not far away, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Do you have any closing statements?
It was a pleasure, Eric, talking with you and having these great conversations, a little discussion back and forth. And Howard, thanks for inviting me back on your show.
Todd, thank you very much. Eric, thank you very much. And the audience that has not commented, I'm going to have to figure out if they're not commenting because they're not interested. They're not commenting because they can't see this. They don't have the right link, or it's just a lousy show, but at least we enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Always make it fun.
All right,
Howard.
You take care. Bye-bye.
You as well. Take care.